Good morning, everybody. Just to make sure, how many people here work in organizations that have tried to adopt DevOps practices in some way? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you feel, raise your hand if you feel that the adoption is very successful. Okay, that's about a tenth. Raise your hand if you think the adoption is currently challenged or kind of failing or maybe is going to fail in some way. Raise your hand if you think that. Okay. Raise your hand if you had coffee. I just want to make sure who's awake. Okay, that's enough people. That's good. Where do we start? DevOps Mind Traps. Well, actually, we'll start about why am I even doing this talk? You see, I've been, as the presenter kindly said, in the software industry for about 20 years. I actually started out in Visual Basic, if anyone remembers that. I still hold a warm place in my heart for VB6, and I hope one day it will be open sourced and we can use it in our DevOps practices. Just kidding. One of the things I've been doing in the past few years, I wrote a book about unit testing, and the book was successful, but unit testing has always still been a challenge. Even to this day, if I go to companies, unit testing is still one of the most difficult things for a lot of people to implement. And I'm not even talking about test-driven development. I'm talking about just pure unit testing in a maintainable, readable way. And I've been teaching this stuff for a long time. So maybe there is a mind trap in trying to adopt that kind of practice. What type of mind traps, what type of issues that we think are true but might not be true exist in adopting DevOps at large enterprises? So in the past few years, I've been consulting for some of the largest companies in the world, Fortune 50 companies, on adopting DevOps and CI/CD at an enterprise level. And the good news is that I've seen quite a bit of failure, and I think failure is one of the best teachers. And I'm happy to say that I've had quite a few failures in teaching people and consulting, but I've also had some success. So this talk is about what actually did work and why some of the things that we tried didn't work. So these are patterns that keep repeating. But in the agenda today, we're going to talk about three different things. We're going to talk about influence forces and why they affect our behavior when we try to adopt these new type of skills. It's also going to talk about DevOps specific things. We're going to talk about the mind traps, but we'll also talk about the context of the enterprise. You see, mind traps, specifically in the DevOps world, are about adoption and metrics and teams and collaborations and pipelines. There are many different patterns and anti-patterns that exist when we try to implement DevOps at a company that is, an enterprise company. So let's talk about what an enterprise company is. If we understand those influence forces and how to understand why we think the way we think about some challenges in an enterprise situation, maybe we can try to dissolve some of those issues. We can try to understand why we think that's impossible, and maybe we can change it. Maybe we want to get our team to change their practices to be more DevOps or CI/CD way, and we can't. And this talk is about what do we do in that case. And the idea is that when you are now going to spend the whole day at this conference, you're going to learn a bunch of different things. The next talk is going to be about 500 deploys a day in GitHub. And what's really going to happen, and I've seen this many times, is a lot of people are going to go to their companies after this conference. And they're going to tell their friends, we saw this talk about this and that and 500 deploys a day, and everyone on the team is going to be like, wow, that's awesome. We should totally do that here. And then someone is going to say, yeah, but I don't think we have time to do all that stuff. We have, bigger fish to fry. We have these fires to put out. Our schedule doesn't allow that. We don't have the resources. We don't have the funding, the budgets. We don't have the skill set. We don't have a bunch of stuff. And even if we try to do that, our manager is going to say, what the hell are you doing? All I wanted was this page to go on that environment, so please just do that. Leave Docker alone. And this is usually what happens. We come in, we have all these great ideas of what we should do and how we should do it, and then somehow, in real life, it dissipates. So what I want you to do is when you listen to talks in this conference, I want you to try to understand what's going to prevent you from implementing those things in your company and how you're going to overcome that. And to understand that, we're going to talk about a great book that I read a few years ago. It's called Influencer, The Power to Change Anything. And one of the realizations I had is whenever I try to get people to do things like unit testing or get more budget for build machines or get more build agents or whatever resources I needed or change people's behaviors regarding schedule, I always thought that there is a level where you can get stuck when you tried everything and then just life sticks you somewhere and you cannot change it, right? If you want to get someone to change, you say, okay, you know what, as an IT person, as a developer, I talk to the person. I convince them that it's the right idea. And you know what? We even went on a course together to learn this new skill. So obviously now that both of these things have happened, behavior should change, right? We should start doing the new thing. We went on a 2-day Scrum Master course. We went to a 3-day TDD course with Roy Osherove. Amazing, by the way. And of course, now we're just going to start doing all that stuff. But really, a lot of people say, yeah, we're going to do it, and then nothing happens. We get stuck in these situations, and we have no idea why these things are happening. And one of the things this book actually exposed to me is the idea that there are 4 other types of motivations to look at. You see, we usually, as people, when we talk to other people, we only think about the first 2. Personal motivation, does the person actually want to do what they want to do, what we want them to do, or do they want to stop doing the bad behavior, which is, for example, checking in code without, running unit tests or automating things or doing code reviews or whatever it is we want them to do. And the second is personal ability, which is, does the person actually know or is able to physically perform the task we want them to do? For example, manage the Jenkins pipeline. But if they have both of those things, what else could be influencing them? And there are 2 other facets, social and structural. Social motivation is basically how people react around you when you do a specific behavior. If you're the only person in your team doing something and everyone else looks at you and says, that's stupid, it's very likely you're going to stop doing it. Even though you have the ability and the motivation, it's very difficult to face peer pressure and not change your behavior. So sometimes, for example, if you have a person that always says, no, this will never work, maybe changing it is very difficult without getting the people around him to react when he does the negative behavior. I think someone has a phone call. The second thing that happened, by the way, as an example here, I was consulting for this development team, and they had nightly builds. And I asked the question to one of the developers, hey, what if we took the nightly builds and we ran them multiple times a day? And the developer asked, what's the point of that? I mean, we have nightly builds. And that's okay, because I'm a consultant. I expect developers sometimes to not know the point of continuous delivery, and then that's why I'm there. But then the DevOps person, there was a DevOps department in this company. The DevOps person who was there in the room at the time also said, yeah, what's the point? You have nightly, everything is okay. And that's the point where that's an example of social motivation, you see? Because now the developer has this thought. Not only do I think this is worthless, but also the DevOps person, the person who's supposed to represent DevOps values here in this organization, who's supposed to be helping, who represents the expert in this team, also thinks this is useless. So why would I ever change my mind if the person who's supposed to be giving me the right answers is also thinking the same thing? So to be able to change the behavior of that team, one of the things that I would need to do, and I did, is go and talk to the DevOps department leaders and talk to them about the fact that we want the DevOps people to actually understand CI/CD, continuous delivery values, so that when those talks actually happen, they support those values. You see, I need that support from other people around the person I'm talking to. And that's one of the key points, is that social pressure is also an important thing. The people you follow make a difference in how you think about things. So maybe you want to change someone's mind, find someone they respect that thinks the opposite way, and get them talking. Social ability is strength in numbers. You don't want to be the only one doing something. What if we had an internal company meetup, or some kind of maybe a conference, or anything that supports the behavior I want to have? I don't want to be the only crazy person in my team doing, automated builds and just-in-time environments and all that stuff. I don't want to be the only crazy professor in my team. What if around the company there was another crazy one there, another crazy one there, and we met, once a week or once a month to discuss our crazy professor ideas of how we are going to take the team further. And suddenly I don't feel alone anymore. I don't feel like, I'm the only person who thinks this makes sense. There are other people like me, and that helps me support the right habit. So if you want to foster more behaviors, maybe creating support groups at the company level could help. Structural motivation is the idea that the company around us actually pushes or pulls in the right direction or the wrong direction. For example, it doesn't matter how much the people around me want to do automated testing. It doesn't matter how much I want to do it, how much I know how to do it. If my manager comes in and tells me, hey, Roy, listen, we don't have time for this. I want you to just stop doing that thing because we have more important things. So please do that. Just finish the feature. Don't worry about the testing for now. If that happens, that's basically a reward system or a punishment system at the company level for a specific type of behavior. It only takes one of these influence forces to break a specific type of behavior. So it doesn't matter how much people want to do it, how much they can do it, how much people around them want them to do it, how many support groups there are. If at the end of the day you get more money at the end of the year for doing the wrong behavior, you're going to do that, right? I have 3 kids. I need to feed them. If I'm going to get more money, or I'm going to get berated by my manager for doing the wrong behavior, or I'm going to get more bonuses for doing the right behavior, if I'm measured by the right things, it's very likely that I'm going to change. And one of the things I'm going to talk about later is the idea of metrics, and how the metrics, how we measure our progress in a DevOps world, can completely change the behavior of the people that are being measured. And the last one is structural ability. The physical environment around us allows or not allows to do the right thing. For example, I want to have automated builds, but do I have enough resources? Do I have the servers needed? I want to have parallel builds that are faster. Do I have the budget? Do I have the resources for running parallel build agents? I want to be able to do pair programming or knowledge sharing with the IT folks or the security or compliance or whoever. But the tables are physically designed. Have you ever seen those tables that are round? So you only have room for your belly. Basically, you sit there, the table is around you. There's only room for one person to sit at the table. A person wants to pair with you, they have to sit like at the corner of the table, kind of looking at your screen. So it's actually difficult to do pair programming in places that are not designed like that. It's difficult to communicate with people if they're remote, if they're overseas. How many people here work in companies that have remote teams, like in the US or India? How fun is it to communicate with those people? Is it a lot of fun or really, really a lot of fun? These are the only 2 options, right? At the company level, those are the metrics. It's so difficult because we want to do the right thing. But the physical ability of me to talk to the person and actually get anything done in the right time prevents me from doing that. And you know what? The person on the other side very likely wants to do the right thing as well. And they have the same difficulties. Sometimes the difficulties are physical in culture. The way we communicate, the way they communicate could be very, very different. And that goes to personal ability. The idea that sometimes we don't know how to communicate well with a different culture. So sometimes to understand why some things happen or don't happen, we have to think about all these factors. And one of the realizations I had from the book is, look, if you see a behavior in the wild that you want to change, right? You want to promote some of the things that you saw here in this conference. And you say, I want this to become that in my company, right? We describe a behavior. We want to say, when something physical happens here, I want a different physical thing to happen instead. For example, when that person talks about, for me, it was when the DevOps person gives a comment about nightly builds, I want them to say that it's a good idea to have multiple builds a day, not the other way around, right? That's an example of behavior. So we choose a behavior, and when we start thinking and then I basically create kind of this chart. I'm trying to understand, why is this behavior, how can I change it? Especially, I do this chart when I have no idea why it's not working. I try to do something and it doesn't work. I try to change something and nothing changes. Everyone says, yeah, that's great, and nothing changes. And then I'm basically stuck. So then I use a variation of this chart. And the idea is for that specific person to change their behavior. What could be causing that? And I kind of try to play Sherlock Holmes. I'm trying to understand, does the person actually want to do that? Did I actually talk to the person? Is the person physically able to do the behavior I want them to do? Those are the two most important things at the personal level. But at the social level, how do the people around that person, do they also act the same? Is the person, are they the only one acting this way? Or is there a whole group of people acting in a way that is not beneficial to the company? Well, what about the company and the reward system in the company? Does that person actually benefit from doing the wrong behavior? Is there a way to design or talk to the managers about changing the measurement or reward systems so that the right behavior will actually take place? So think of it more like a checklist, right? I look at this. This is what it looks like in the book. And it's all a variation of the same ideas, those same things. We want to harness peer pressure if we want to change something. We want to find strength in numbers so that person changing behavior is not alone. We want a person to surpass their limits so they learn how to do something. We want to make something not desirable, desirable. That's personal motivation. We want the rewards and accountability at the company level to match the behavior we want to have. And we want to change the environment so that it matches everything. And so then we think about, you know what? So in a place like GitHub, where they do 500 deploys a day, it's not just that someone chose to do 500 deploys a day. The company around those people, the system around those people, is designed for 500 deploys a day. Everything at the company level supports that, from personal ability and motivation, from what other people do and the expectations they have of you. You're not the only one, and people expect you to do the right thing, to the company rewarding, faster deploys, to the ability of the company to give you the resources to do all those things. All those things have to be true for that behavior to exist. So it's not just a technical skill. The technical skill is basically the easiest part. The difficult part is, of course, people. It's a checklist, it's not a recipe. It's just something I use just to make sure I don't forget all of these ideas, especially when I'm stuck. Now we go back to enterprise challenges. We talked about stuff like GitHub, right? But in enterprises, we have a lot of interesting challenges. In enterprises, we have a lot of interdependent systems, multiple projects, multiple teams. We have a lot of monolithic systems that are sometimes very hard to refactor or communicate via APIs or move between different servers. We have usually a lot of approval gates, change control boards. Have you ever been at a company where you want to change a firewall rule in production or any other environment? Wait for the second Tuesday of every month. That's when the fire rules change. Firewall rules, not fire rules, right? There are these committees and boards and all these approval gates. So you want to get something done, you have to get with the schedule of the company. The heartbeat of the company can be very, very slow. There's compliance, security, medical, financial, doesn't matter. Usually in enterprise companies, there are compliance-related issues, things that basically everything I'm saying here is an example of structural ability and structural motivation. There are waterfall-based processes. There are manual and error-prone processes as well. So now you take all this stuff and you say, okay, given all this system around me that is perfectly designed to do the opposite of what it is I'm trying to do, which is DevOps, how can I change something, right? And that's one of the reasons I say it's very difficult to take the things that you learned here today and just apply them, especially you work at a large company. Because it's not just about personal motivation and ability. There are structural changes. There are structural motivations and reward systems at the company level that would prevent people from doing the right thing. Okay. And that leads us to the idea of the mind traps. Because the mind traps, the ideas that we have that could be wrong, ideas that we have that if we thought about them differently would give us maybe a way into change. And a lot of those mind traps are specifically designed or influenced by the influence forces I mentioned before. And when I go through them, we can also start talking about, well, now I understand why this is happening or why this is affecting people badly, so I can change it. Or I can at least talk to the people who could change it. We'll start with adoption. So in large companies, a lot of times the CTOs or CFOs or a lot of different types of people will actually try to move and adopt DevOps practices at a company level. And one of the biggest mind traps are, you have to change all or nothing. The idea that change cannot be incremental, or incremental would actually be a problem. So then people have this notion, especially at high-level management, oh, we just do a big bag transformation. We start here and then we end up there and everything is great. So then they gather all the middle management and they gather all the IT staff and say, we are going to start doing DevOps. No more just Scrum or Safe. We're going to do DevOps as well. And this time it's actually going to work. We're all going to do continuous deliveries 500 times a day. Everyone's going to do amazing. And all the IT guys are like, absolutely. Absolutely, I agree with you. And then the CTO gives the order, march. And everyone just starts. And they go and they say, okay, we got to do 500 deploys a day. Okay, quick, I want you to give me an environment in production. And of course, compliance goes, no, you can't have an environment in production. What, are you crazy? And then someone said, no, we need to deploy. And then security guys are saying, no, you don't have access to production. What, are you insane? Oh, you don't have resources. You don't have licenses. The rules are against you. And everyone just tries and bangs their head against the wall. So big bang transformations, especially when you try to boil the ocean, you try to change everything too much, too fast. You know, they start with focus, then they fear, then panic, and then at some point people abort a lot of these. And if you can get through that, you might have a chance. But it's so difficult, it's basically impossible on a realistic level. It's much better to look at a transformation as a series of experiments. Do pilot projects. And on the first pilot project you take and you measure, you take one application or even one component of an application, you say, for this one, I would like to try a DevOps mindset. This one is going to behave differently than the entire organization, and we can learn from it all of the challenges and all of the influence forces that are making it difficult to adopt in that project. And as we break them one by one, we learn as an organization, what does it take to actually do CI/CD, real continuous delivery, real automated pipelines. So pilot applications and teams, taking this small feature team and saying, you have special rules. You have the ability to do the thing you've always wanted to do. And of course, that's going to be very, very difficult. But at least it's going to be difficult at a small scale instead of getting everyone in a panic. Because the team starts by the idea that it's going to be difficult, and the point is to face the walls, to face the glass ceilings that are preventing us from doing the right thing. Kind of like a, what do you call it? Like a scouting group that says, I'm going to go into the Wild West. I'm going to return and tell you my findings and what we need to change. Second mind trap in adoption is supporting only the top or only the bottom lines in the troops. Basically, the idea is we want bidirectional support. We can't just go to the IT folks or to the developers and say, we want CI/CD, but not basically give them the motivation and give them the ability, but then not go and actually give middle management the ability to support them. Because if those people then go and try to do the right thing, but middle management is still saying, no, you can't do that. We're still measured on schedules and all that stuff. Then what happens is that the team is trying to do the right thing, but the other people around it do not give it the right support. So that's an example of structural motivation. Because the team is trying to do the right thing, but management did not give middle management the idea to give them support, give them air cover. They're going to change their estimations. They're going to do things a bit slower to learn. They're going to have access to things that no one has ever had access before in the organization, and you need to give them support. And if we don't have that support, then basically the team fails, because the team tries to do things at the team level, but from a structural, from environment, from the company, reward structure and ability, they're going to fail. Third, no policy change. Here's an example of a simple pipeline that you could have for one application. At the top, let's see if I can do that. Oh, you see at the top here we have the idea of coding and development, deploying application. At the bottom we have infrastructure and infrastructure validation and automation and deployment, and these two things go together. This is kind of what a lot of people think about as the idea of DevOps. Infrastructure is code, infrastructure being treated just like code is treated, which is cool. That's definitely part of the package. And the pipeline goes on and does capacity tests and maybe production deploys, and all that's well and good. As we design the team, let's say it's a pilot team, we say, okay, this is the pipeline we would like to have for our application. But of course, security folks are going to come in and say, production deploy? What the hell are you talking about? Who the hell are you? And why do you even want to touch my production servers? No. Production servers are done by a different team in a different country, in a different time zone, different set of rules, different set of tools, different set of everything. And when they do something, you won't know about it. Give them a zip file, give them a Word document, they'll figure it out. Does that sound familiar to anyone, by the way? Unfortunately. Okay. So then what's missing here? What's missing here is policy. You see, really what we want pipelines to be, in a real DevOps world, a company is based on pipelines. The whole company is based on pipeline. If we ask GitHub, GitHub is based on pipelines. 500 deploys a day doesn't just happen. The company is built around the idea of pipelines, the idea that something moves almost automatically and usually automatically through different stages. So when the pipeline is finished, then you have gone through your deployment policy. You've gone through all the policies. The pipeline is the policy. And if we think about it, what if we put security tests in the pipeline? What if we put compliance tests in the pipeline as automated tests? Really what we're saying is that the pipeline is our definition of done for the application. So a pipeline really, other than compilation, is really just a series of tests. And compilation is also a type of test, by the way, to make sure your code integrates. So if a pipeline is just a series of tests, and those tests can represent our policy, we can put policy in the pipeline and not think about policy as a separate thing. That means we actually have to change the policy for the organization, because an organization that has a policy that does not allow automatic deployment to various environments and productions and permissions will not be able to support continuous delivery. So one thing that happens in large companies that I usually consult them to do is to create a tiger team. It's a very American idea, like a tiger team. And, a starting team, a pilot team of compliance, a pilot team of policy or of change management. And the idea is to say, look, our company today supports the old ways. We have change management that supports manual verification and manual this. What if we created for that one pilot team, we created a custom change control management that supports continuous delivery, right? That fits the proper year that we live in. If we supported all that stuff, maybe that team could actually have an exception and use that special policy and actually deploy. So the idea of a Tiger team is to define a policy at the organizational level, and sometimes it involves even legal and a bunch of stuff to support it. But there is a team dedicated. And again, this is the idea of structural ability, right? Because the rules that the company state, you're not allowed to do specific things in a specific way. If you want to do them in that way, you have to change the rules. You have to change the policy. That's why a lot of an example of the same structural ability is that we want to work with the customer in an agile fashion, but the contract that we signed is fixed price, fixed time, fixed scope, fixed everything. And so there's a structural ability problem. It doesn't matter how much we want it to change. We have to understand it so we can change the right thing. Another common mistake in adoption is that we try to adopt DevOps only at lower levels, or we don't have a holistic view of the organization. And the idea of a value stream comes up quite a bit. For that pilot team, if we want to understand what it is, what are we trying to get from DevOps? What is the thing we're trying to change? The first thing we need to do is what is our current state? And one of the best ways to understand current state is to look at the value stream. And the value stream is basically, let's say you took a feature from when it enters the mind of a product owner, and you put a GoPro camera on that feature. And you say, feature, tell me everything that happens to you from that moment on. I don't care about release dates. I don't care about sprints. I don't care about anything except what you go through as a feature. So the feature might say, well, I sit there as a request for about a few days, and then for about half an hour someone works on me, and then I sit there and I wait about 8 hours until someone approves. It takes about 1 hour. And then I wait about 160 hours, but really they're only working on me for 60 hours out of that 160, because a lot of time is wait, sometimes there's weekends. And then there's a sign-off, and I wait this, and then there's 100 hours of waiting, but 40 hours on average of actual work being done. And what you see here in the blue boxes are the total calendar time, and in the white boxes what you see are the actual work that it takes to work on a feature. As an example, you see coding, 280 hours. Maybe that's a sprint. But of that sprint, it only took 80 hours to work on that specific feature. So that feature ends up waiting 200 hours for the end of the sprint. So that's an example of actual feature wait time, or waste, really. When we understand the total accumulation of the total time here, and the total accumulation of actual time here, we'll see usually a big difference. 10, 20, maybe 30% of our time is actual. So for every cent, for every dollar that you put in, you get 30 cents back of value. That's how you can think about it. And this cycle time, this is the idea of concept to cash. When we talk about cycle times and value streams, we want to say, well, we as a team, we have to face all of these things. This is our handoff. And of course, this changes for every team, could be completely different. But as a company, we want to understand all of the workflow that someone has to go through. And there could be many different parallel workflows. And we take an average one for that specific pilot project, and we say, okay, this is what it looks like. And maybe for that feature to be deployed to production, including all the design and all the testing and all the whatever we need to do, maybe it took that feature 9 months. We have a release every 3 months, but that feature took 3 releases. Because it was waiting here. It started 2 releases ago, and now it's finally ending up here. So our true cycle time could be 9 months. I'm not saying that's the number here. I'm just giving you an example. And a lot of companies, when we do that exercise with them, we find out that the time it takes is usually much longer than they thought it would take. And then the meeting always turns kind of dark and say, really? Really? That's what it takes us? That's crazy. Why is it taking that time? And then it starts these beautiful, interesting conversations between people, because when we hold these meetings, we get the entire team in a room, including the stakeholders, including the PO and security and compliance, whoever needs to be there. So it takes usually 2 to 3 hours to find out a lot of this information at the beginning. So the cycle time is an example of a measure, of a metric. And you can actually use an Excel file. That's what I usually use. And then that gives you the numbers that you want to have. So let's talk more about metrics. Here's a common metrics, a common mind trap that happens in a lot of DevOps organizations. And I've actually seen this just in the past few months in a large company I'm consulting for. Okay, we're going to do DevOps. We're going to do a lot of deploys. We're going to measure how many green builds you have. Okay? So we're going to know if you have red builds. And you're going to be measured on the amount of green builds you have, because green builds are good, right? A green build means that everything is okay. It means that you're able to release, technically. And of course, we want to see the highest code coverage possible. And then what happens? Magically, within a few weeks, most builds become totally green. In fact, there are almost zero, sometimes there are zero red builds. However, development comes to almost a complete halt because everyone is afraid to break the build. You want people to not be afraid to break the build, because if they're afraid to break the build, they're going to be afraid to commit the code. They're afraid to commit the code doesn't see the light of day. They create these branches. Those branches live for weeks and months because they're afraid of merging to the master branch, because we're being measured on green builds. We're not being measured on quality or on delivery. We're being measured on the success of the builds. So let's make them successful. What about coverage? Again, I've consulted multiple teams about testing. And what ends up when management sets coverage as a high priority task is some of this conversation usually happens. Our teams, we just implemented sonar checks in our Jenkins pipelines for all teams, and our teams has the lowest code coverage of them all. So for the next few weeks, we're all going to just focus on code coverage and writing unit tests. And then I sit and I pair with people. And we write down, we do TDD. And at some point, a person will say something like, if we just call this function right there in the test, we could get like 10 times the code coverage. Oh no, we don't even have to have asserts. Let's just write a test that executes all the code. I mean, I could, in an hour, I could code a test that goes through 90% of the code. We'll be the team with the highest code coverage in the organization within a week. And that's an example of a conversation you don't want it to happen. Because what it means is that the tests are worthless. So here's what I think about that. Red is good. I want builds to break. Breaking builds are feedback. We need to know that something is breaking. In fact, those builds are breaking even if you put them on branches, you just don't see it. They would have been broken, but they're on a branch, so it's invisible. Red builds are not invisible. So I want builds to be broken sometimes. In fact, I'd rather have 50 broken builds in a day and 3 green ones, because those green ones are really going to matter. They're true builds that provide me with real value, because that means I passed all of the things I needed to pass. All the stars were aligned. All the code was exactly where it should have been. What about code coverage? Low code coverage means one thing. Anybody know? What is low code coverage? You're missing tests, exactly. High code coverage, meaningless. Meaningless. Unless I see your code. I want to see your tests. So high code coverage is meaningless without a code review, meaningless without tests, because I want to see that your tests actually have quality. If your tests are useless, that code coverage is useless, basically. All you're telling me is, hey, I'm getting no exceptions from this code, which is basically the way we used to do it anyway. So we haven't really changed anything. Here's a better metric that provides a different behavior. This metric will push a different type. Again, this is all about influence, right? So what if I measured people not on the amount of red builds, but how long it takes to recover from a red build? I want to measure the time it takes from the first red build to the first green build. Because basically what I'm saying is, I don't mind red builds. Red builds are great. But I do mind if nobody does anything about them. That's the behavior I care about. I want people to care when the build is red. I want them to stop everything and do something about it. I want them to have feature flags or whatever it is they need to do so they can change things, they can fix things faster. Because a red build is good feedback, and I want people to react to feedback fast. That's what this metric provides. Okay, here are other types of metrics for DevOps. Lead time to change, that's a cycle time. If I measure cycle time at a management level, basically I'm saying I'm measuring how long it takes that feature with the GoPro camera from one side to the other. So now I'm not just optimizing locally at a team level, I'm actually optimizing at a company level. Release frequency. I'm not just optimizing code and tests, I'm actually optimizing how long between deploys. And deploys are that's basically what I want to have as a DevOps organization, because I need the feedback. So if I measure release frequency, I'm going to get better release frequencies. And release frequencies require usually more automation and all the things that usually we would want to have. Defect rates, I want to measure quality. And I want to measure mean time to recovery, which is very close to what I just said about recover from red to green. But this time we're talking about production. You see, a lot of IT organizations are being measured on a thing called mean time to failure. Has anyone here ever heard that or something close to that? Mean time to failure basically means how long between failures, right? And then you have uptime. My uptime is 99999, right? What's the best way to preserve uptime? As an IT person in charge of production, the best way for me to maintain a system that doesn't break is don't change it. Don't change it. It works. And then the developers come to you, right? Because they're being measured on something else. I'm being measured on the opposite. They're coming to me and saying, we want to do DevOps. We want to do multiple releases a day. And me, I'm saying, multiple releases a day? What, are you insane? No, you get one release a month, maybe if I'm generous. Right? Because I'm measured on the opposite. So instead, what I would want to do is I want to be measured on mean time to recovery. It's okay to have failures in production. It's not okay that I recover slowly from those failures. So then I'm measured on how fast the system recovers from production errors, maybe by having different types of deploys, canary deploys, maybe by having feature flags being turned on and off. So now it gives me the incentive to work with developers on pushing the right behavior. And that's exactly what I want. I want people I don't want to just say things to people. What I want is for people to change their behavior. And if I want to change that behavior, I have to change the system around them. So, in summary, enterprise, right? The challenges in enterprise, they're built into a lot of such big companies, but really what they represent is structural motivation and structural ability. That's what they represent, and that's why it's so difficult to push things in large companies. But if we understand that, and if we learn more about these influence forces, we can learn to understand why some things are happening, and we can actually change things. Sometimes we think things are true, but they're actually false. For example, our estimations can include quality or not, but we're giving people the option to reduce quality when we shouldn't. That's a mind trap. If I'm telling you, hey, you can have this feature fast, but badly, or you can have it slow, but amazing, usually people will go for the fast. But my work as someone who does the work as an estimation, I don't actually give people the option. The power is in the hands of the person doing the estimation. The power is in actually your hands, because you're the professionals building it. And if you're telling people what they want to hear instead of what's the truth, then now you're doing the thing. You're actually influencing them. You're the person reacting. You're giving them the social ability to say, okay, we'll do it in half the time with double the features. You're the ones enabling it. We are. Because we are not reacting in the proper way. We are part of those influence forces on the people who do us wrong. The people who make us do things. But they're not making us. We're making ourselves. We're the one who say, yes, I'll do it. We are enabling a lot of those behaviors. So, mind traps, influence forces. True DevOps is not just about tooling. In fact, the tooling is the most easy part. The most difficult part is to understand the people around us and the system around us and helping to change it. So with that, I hope you have a good conference. I hope you enjoy. Whatever you take here as learning, always put that in the back of your mind. What prevents us from doing that in our company today? Try to have that list, and may the force be with you. Thank you very much, everybody.